Well, it's nice to speak with you today, Renaud, and I look forward to hearing your views on China as far as Chinese importers and your views on whether they should work with a factory of the right size. Can you start by providing a brief background of yourself?
Sure. Hi, Dustin. Um, Glad to be here with you today. In 2005, after I finished my studies and after working for some time in France, I moved to Hong Kong, worked in a small trading company there, working in garments. Very small trading company, so it was pretty interesting, working both on the sales side and on the purchasing and factory management and quality control side. Um, After 18 months, I was tired of being, you know, um, between a rock and a hard place. I mean, it's pretty hard to do trading, especially without all the resources you would need. So I stopped doing that. I quit. I started my own company, actually doing QC inspections, quality control, factory audits, product inspections, these kind of things, helping some importers in China, and been doing this since end of 2006, early 2007. There was a transition. Um, been based in Guangdong, that's South China, since then, and visited, probably hundreds of factories in very different industries, either to evaluate them typically before an importer would place an order there. They want to make sure um, that their claims are true, and that what kind of processes they have, and what kind of products they're really making, and do they really have the engineering capabilities they say they have, and all these kind of things. And also, checking product quality to make sure it's up to the buyer's standard. So I've been working with tens of importers, mostly from Western Europe and North America, uh, of very different sizes, from the small one guy, working, maybe selling on eBay or Amazon or something like that, to the division within a much bigger company. And that's given me some perspective on the kind of the different needs of different types of buyers. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today.
Thank you. My first question is why should importers in China work with a factory of the right size?
Well, that's pretty important. When an importer starts to look for a new supplier, well, that's provided they don't want to work with a trading company, because if they work with a trading company, then that can smooth out a lot of things, but that can have a lot of other problems also. You're kept in the dark regarding your supply chain, and you don't really know if you're gouging on pricing, and so most buyers would try to buy direct. So when you buy direct, you really want to make sure you work with the factory of the right size. Now, here's why. If you work with a factory that's way too big, your orders are going to be peanuts for them. Maybe your orders are going to represent 0.1% of their annual production. Well, they you know they're not really going to care about you. They're going to give you a higher pricing. Very often we see this in China. A factory would give very good pricing to their big buyers because they really want the orders. They're very excited about volume, high volume orders, but they would make most of their margin, if not all of their margin, on the smaller buyers that don't really have much choice, and that are willing to pay 40% more, or sometimes double the price. Okay, so if you work with a much bigger company, as I said, you might well have to pay more. And the second problem also is that you're not going to have any weight on them. Even if they're big, they still run in a very Chinese way, if I may say that, meaning that they, um, you know, they're late, a good part of the time. So who gets the priority when it comes down to expedite some orders? Of course, the big customers. So all the small customers need to wait. Your orders just get bumped, to later and later. Sometimes it's 2 months late, and that's it. It's take it or leave it. The chances are they already got 30%, a 30% down payment from the buyer, and they don't really care. You want to go somewhere else, no problem, whatever. You're just peanuts to us. Okay, so that's so that they don't give much importance to your orders, and they're not going to be very flexible. All right. Now, if you work with a factory that's way too small for your orders, well, obviously they're not going to be able to complete your orders, the whole quantity by themselves in the kind of time frame that you give them, which means they're going to have to subcontract. This is extremely common in China, and that's one of the main reasons why you have quality disasters here, because the factory just farmed out the job to some other place. And of course, don't get me wrong, when they farm the job out, they don't put it in a nicer factory. It's always driven by cost. So, okay, we don't have the capacity, we put it somewhere else. Let's just put it in the place that gives us the lowest price, the lowest cost. So it ends up in small workshops that don't even have quality control staff most of the time. And I'm talking about, 20 people, 50 people, maybe 100 people, totally unstructured, 100% focused on making production as fast as possible. So you don't expect good quality from these kind of things. You're going to have problems. And maybe part of it will be good, part of it will be bad, depending on where production ended up. But that's very risky. So that's what I would say. Be careful. Don't place production in a very large factory, and don't place production in a small factory that can't handle your volumes.
Do you have some examples of importers working with factories of the right size?
Well, sure. So, for example, okay, I have a client that has a seasonal activity. So they work a lot. Let's say they buy a lot for shipments around April and May, and then around October and November. So they work with factories that are going to be, let's say, 50% busy with the orders during that peak season, but they don't want to be only 5% of their capacity, because again that would be a cause for problems. Low, bad follow-up by management mainly, and high prices. No leverage really, and they don't want to be 110% of the factories during the peak season, because it just doesn't happen. What are they going to do with their other customers? They need to produce anyway, right? So there's going to be a rush. It's going to be in a rush, and when it's done in a rush, quality always suffers. And you're basically forcing the factory to subcontract. Even if you tell them it's forbidden, they'll just do it. So that's an example. Now let's take another example. Okay, the reversal. A small client of mine that visited a very nice Taiwanese-owned factory, very big, was very impressed. That happens a lot, and the guys told him, "Oh yeah, but if you want to work here, your orders are pretty small. We're not going to do several payments. Just pay us 100% before production starts." And the buyer was, well, all right, I'm safe. I mean, these guys are really good. And then he gets screwed. I mean, they subcontracted. We came, and quality was terrible, and he was really upset about that. But they totally refused to rework. They say, oh, well, quality is not that bad. Actually, it's fine with our other customers and blah, blah, blah. And in the end, the buyer just had to decide, do I take the goods or do I just, forget about all the money I paid? So that's really what you want to avoid.
And what are your any final recommendations?
Well, keep this in mind. When you're starting to source some suppliers, um, keep this in mind. The size of the supplier. That's one of the criteria that you will use to select them. You need to kind of form, the idea of the perfect supplier profile in your mind, and then go look for that profile. Uh, if you're in a very narrow product category in China, you might have difficulties finding a lot of suppliers and really have the choice. But if you work in one of the major categories, I don't know, maybe iPhone covers or e-cigarettes or something like that, very dynamic categories. You have hundreds of manufacturers now doing that. You're gonna have an easy time, on globalsources.com or Alibaba.com or on trade shows. You're gonna have a lot of choice. So narrow it down, check on their profile. What's the size? Too big. Too, 1,000 people, 2,000 people. Just, if you have small orders, just forget it. You should shoot for, let's say, 400 to 600 people, right? So that's, I think, the conclusion for buyers. There's a lesson right here. Just keep this in mind and make it one of the criteria in your supplier selection process.
And thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, let me. What I'll